worry, we got you covered.
This is Richmond's Morning News with Rich Herrera on News Radio WRVA.
All right, good morning, everybody. It's News Radio WRVA. It is 8:34. If you're just getting into the office, don't forget you can listen to us on 1140, of course, 96.1 FM, the Odyssey app, and now you can watch us on YouTube and Facebook at News Radio WRVA on YouTube. My channel is Rich for America. By the way, if you check out our YouTube channel, we have one video that's gone viral, and that's Governor Jim Gilmore talking about gerrymandering. I think he's up to almost 18,000 views now, as people around the country have looked to the wisdom of Governor Gilmore, and we get that every Thursday because we have the fine opportunity to catch up with him on Thursdays here on News Radio WRVA. Good morning, sir.
Oh, good morning, Rich. Glad to be with you.
Thank you so much. Let's start right here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we'll get to international matters coming up after 9 o'clock. But let's just start right now. Your reaction to what we saw happen in Portsmouth yesterday with the FBI raiding Senator Lucas, not only her office, but her business as well.
Look, Rich, I've been a defense lawyer, a defense trial lawyer. I've been an elected Commonwealth's attorney prosecutor, and I have nothing to say about this because we don't know anything. We just don't know anything about what the FBI is doing, what its case is all about, if it has one, or any facts. So I have no comment on it at all, really.
It's interesting when you look at the what happens in the news, what people talk about, and the perception of all of this. I messed up earlier. I meant to say everybody is innocent until proven guilty. And I said it backwards. I want to make sure everybody knows you're innocent until proven guilty. How important is that for someone who's been a prosecutor, who's been our attorney general, for all of us to remember that these are just investigations, raids, and everyone does have that presumption of innocence, no matter whether you have an R or D next to your name?
Well, certainly. I mean, if you're a prosecutor, you know that you've got to have your case lined up and ready to go before you ever bring a charge. That's the main thing right there. In fact, there's a provision in the Virginia Code of Ethics for prosecutors that says that if you don't reasonably think that you can prove your case, you have no right to bring it because that's an abuse of the process, which is something I think that's being discussed at the national level right now. But people are innocent until proven guilty. If they bring the evidence forward, they're going to lose, and they have to prove at a high burden. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt.
So that's interesting. I think I've shared with you before. The best man at my wedding, one of my fraternity brothers. He spoke at my mom and dad's funerals. That's how close we are. He was a prosecutor before, and now he's a judge. But he always reminds me that it's not what I know; it's what I can prove. And that burden is a lot different. So if I'm going to bring a case, and he reminds me this all the time, whether he was prosecuting somebody or he's on the bench judging a case, that we're talking about someone's liberty, not just, the headlines and everything else. We're talking about this person's liberty, and the burden of proof for a prosecutor is, I better make sure I take this seriously. This is not anything I will trifle with, because we're talking about taking someone and putting them behind bars, which is taking their liberty.
Yeah, I've put a lot of thought into it. I've even tried to imagine what it would be like to be in prison, because sometimes you get very sympathetic about that. But the goal here really is to deter people from doing the wrong thing in order to protect victims. You don't want somebody out there being robbed or somebody being broken into. You want to deter all that. You want to tell people, want to send a message to people, don't do this in the first place, because you might end up behind bars. Then we all feel very sympathetic about it. But the fact is that you have to have some rule of law someplace. But the rule of law is perfectly clear on criminal cases. You have to prove beyond a reasonable. By the way, you look at A Few Good Men. Everybody's seen that movie with Tom Cruise. At one point, he rants when he's trying to prepare and says, it doesn't matter what you say. It matters what I can prove. And that's exactly the right attitude towards a prosecutor. And you should never bring the case at all if you don't have your ducks lined up.
And again, we're not going to talk about the specifics of what's going on with Senator Lucas, but it is a big deal when the feds get involved. And I was explaining this to the audience earlier. The power of the FBI and the Justice Department, unless you're in their crosshairs, it's hard for any of us to understand how big that is. And I went down the rabbit hole watching something on YouTube after I watched one of your videos the other day that I'm not even sure why the algorithm popped this up, but when the feds come after you, they have mountains of lawyers, mountains of money, and it's a pretty daunting task to take on the FBI and the Justice Department.
Well, I mean, that's exactly right. The power of the state is that they don't have to pay lawyers' fees. They already got lawyers, and they're paying attorneys on staff to bring cases and prosecute cases. Meanwhile, the poor defendant, in order to prove he's innocent, has got all of a sudden to hire a lawyer at $600 to $700 an hour. And that's a real problem. If you bring a case that is not justified, that's a way of almost producing a civil penalty. If you're a prosecutor and you say, I know I can't prove this case, but I'm going to bring it just to harass the defendant and make him miserable. That's in a way, imposing a fine on the person, because even if he's found innocent, he's out the money for the lawyer. So that's why it's wrong. And you have to be cautious about that and have legal ethics. By the way, you mentioned this podcast that I did with you, and I looked last night and it said it had 26,000 viewers.
26. Wow.
I find it impossible to believe. There's something funny going on here.
No, it's not. No,
it couldn't be.
Listen, I put something up next to yours same day. Like I had 5 people watch me. You got 24,000. That's why you were an ambassador and a governor. People want to hear from you. That's why we love having you on Thursdays here on News Radio WRVA. It's 8:40 this morning as we talk with Governor Jim Gilmore. I did want to get your comments and your thoughts on, now we see the third court case has made its way through the Richmond courts, through the appellates, and now will be heard by the Supreme Court. The Supremes now have 3 cases in front of them. One is the Tazewell one that you and I talked about when I got back from Ireland. You have Tazewell 2, which is a second lawsuit that was filed after the election, and now the one by the national GOP and our congressional Congress that's fighting against these gerrymander lobster maps or whatever you want to call them. All the court watchers are trying to figure out, and it just depends on the day of the day of the week and the wind, on whether they think this is going to be great for the Republicans or great for the Democrats. What should people think about when they're court watching?
Well, first of all, it's just very awkward when you consider that the referendum's already been held, and even though it was a very slight win for the yes people, which means that this map could go into effect, it basically just proves that the state is just about 50-50. And you got a plan underway now that's going to disenfranchise half the people of Virginia for the other half. It's really very morally wrong. But as far as the cases go, yeah, you've got cases before the court right now, and there's arguments being made that the Democrats rushed this through because they're trying to rig the election this year. They're trying to rig the 2026 election. And so they rushed it through, and the argument is being made that they didn't do their procedures properly. They didn't post it properly. They didn't run through all the processes properly. And if the court finds that to be the case, then that's going to void the referendum. And because, you can't have an unfair election. I mean, an unfair referendum. If you're going to do that. So, but I think the thing that's coming up the pike, though, is the third one, which basically says that the referendum was wrong because it's not compact and contiguous, and that the ballot language was illegal. The ballot language, official ballot language, was a fraud. It basically told the voters that are in the voting booth on the language of the referendum that it was fair, which it was not. And that it was temporary, which it is not. So the public was misled. And the question is, can you switch a point and a half in order to make the referendum fail? Sure you can. The budget language probably provided that extra little push. So all this is going on in the courts right now. But I think that there's a very strong chance here that the court will not tolerate this misconduct. Because remember what they're doing. What they're doing here is trying to make it a 10-to-1 representation in the Congress instead of a 6-5. It's deliberately and admittedly and openly unfair. And my point has been consistently that they're not just trying to rig this election, the 26th election, to try to get at Trump or something. It's going to have an impact on the Republican Party and its ability to offer candidates, to raise money, to do what's necessary to be a legitimate competitor in the Virginia political field. That's what they're doing. ultimately they're trying to make themselves the one party the way it was back in the old days. And we just can't, that's just not good for anybody, Rich.
No, not at all. And we'll continue talking about that. We'll continue our conversation with our former governor and ambassador. We're going to turn to international matters coming up next. A one-page memorandum, sir. I want to get your comments coming up after the top of the hour. That could stop all of the conflict in Iran. How likely is that to be? We'll talk with Governor Jim Gilmore about that coming up after our top of the hour newscast. It's 8:44 right now on News Radio WRVA. Quick reminder, our program brought to you in part by GreerFinancialGroup.com. Okay, let me ask you this. Who do you get your financial advice from? When you sat down and you said, okay, I got to find a financial guy, a money guy to help me with my finances. Where did you find him? Did you Google him? Did you look him up? Was he your neighbor's kid's nephew who's just getting started and you've been with them forever? Who knows? I mean, people find their financial advisor in a lot of different ways. And once you're with somebody, it's really tough to say, I'm not really sure, because you grow comfortable with that conversation. If you have somebody you've been working with forever, that's great. But if you got sick and you needed to see your doctor and you think, let me make sure I get a second opinion, wouldn't you do that when it's your health? Why don't you do that with your financial health as well? Have Michael Greer sit down, take a once-over, just to make sure that you're all buttoned up and everything's great when it comes to your retirement savings. Call him right now, 804-427-7784, 804-427-7784. Where did you find your financial guy? And if he's doing great, that's awesome. You can have a peace of mind, but it's better to get that second opinion because we're talking about your retirement. 804-427-7784, or find him online at GreerFinancialGroup.com. Fee-based advisory services processed through and supervised by Rise Wealth Partners, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm.
This is a special alert to all Americans who own a vehicle with less than 200,000 miles with an auto warranty about to expire or with no warranty coverage at all. Due to a decline in the economy, CarShield is announcing a low-cost month-to-month vehicle protection plan that is now available to the public to save any driver out-of-pocket expenses on future auto repairs. Call now to find out how you can pay almost nothing for covered auto repairs. Yes, you heard that correctly. Pay almost nothing for covered auto repairs. An open phone line has been established for all drivers to call for a free quick quote. Call 800-869-2045 now. Drivers who are covered will not have to pay for covered repairs again. This protection plan is at an all-time low. Additionally, drivers who activate this vehicle protection today will also receive free roadside assistance, free towing, and car rental options at no additional cost. Call us for your free quick quote today. 800-869-2045. That's 800-869-2045. What do you have to lose? Call 800-869-2045. Again, 800-869-2045.